Welcome to Divorce, Dating, and Empowered Living with your host, Rosalind Sedacca. Join Rosalind each week on a journey toward overcoming life's many challenges to achieve peace, empowerment, and positive transformation. It's time to relax, unwind, and transform your life with Rosalind Sedacca.
Hello, everyone. This is Rosalind Sedacca, and you're listening to WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network, and our show is Divorce, Dating, and Empowered Living with Rosalind Sedacca. As you know, I'm the founder of the Child-Centered Divorce Network, and every week I interview wonderful guests who really care about families, children, and moving on in the most positive way possible. And each of them has something of real value to contribute. And today, of course, is no different than that. I want to introduce you to, and I'm proud to introduce you to, Andy Heller. And Andy is an entrepreneur who has authored other books, but he has a new book now that's of special interest to us, and that book is called Take the High Road, Divorce with Compassion for Yourself and for Your Family. And in this book, he puts together real valuable tips to help millions of people out there who every year embark on the challenging journey of divorcing. So welcome, Andy. It's so good to be talking with you.
Rosalind, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me as your guest.
So I want to dive in and start by asking you what you think are the biggest mistakes that people who are getting divorced make when they're navigating that divorce.
Well, clearly not putting your children's interest first and getting kind of detoured. That's a big mistake. But in terms of the negotiations, I think the biggest mistake that people make, Rosalind, is a lack of focus. And one of the strongest advices I touch on in the book is you need to manage your attorney, not the other way around. So what I mean by that is identify the 2 or 3 things that are most important to you. And everywhere else, you compromise. You go to your attorney and say, this is what I want to accomplish. These 2 things, whatever my spouse is asking for that is outside this, I'm going to be flexible. But these are the 2 things that are important. This is what I want to be focused on. And this is what I want to accomplish. And I'll give you an example. Let's say that you're divorcing and you really need to reside in a certain geographic proximity for your business, for your support network. Okay, and right now at this time, your spouse lives there. But of course, we're all going to be single now. So you don't know, he or she might meet somebody in a different city. You want to make sure that you don't have to, you're not facing a situation where you're chasing your family or potentially chasing your family around the country. So you tie support to the city that you guys live in. That if one spouse wants to try to move to another city, then the support is recalibrated. So one of the divorcees I interviewed for the book, this was a big concern for him because he just moved and didn't want to do it a second time. So again, another example is I want to have a certain custodial amount of time so I can be impactful in my children's lives. So that's what you want to tell your attorney. Okay, I'll compromise on finances. I'll compromise on here. I'll compromise on the family home. But I want to make sure I have this amount of time so I can be an impactful presence in my children's life. So what happens during the divorce negotiations, because there's so many emotions, that people lose their focus. And then you end up spending a lot more money in attorney fees. It takes a lot longer, and you forgot what was important to you when you started the process.
Well, that's sound advice. I think that's very smart, especially focusing in on a few strategic items rather than just having this huge list that you know is impossible. And, of course, the Child-Centered Divorce Network really encourages people to use mediation and amicable divorce professionals rather than going into divorce litigation whenever possible, because we want to protect the family dynamic in the best way possible, and litigation doesn't always do that on behalf of the families and especially the children. So I was wondering if you... I
couldn't agree more.
Good. So I'd appreciate if you talk a little bit more about how divorce negatively impacts kids and what we can do before the divorce is finalized to assure the best outcome for them.
That's a great suggestion. I'm going to give you a very interesting answer. There's so many emotions that are percolating during divorce. It's actually quite challenging for parents to identify that. So one of the strongest advices I give in the book is to involve a professional who is completely and solely interested in your children's well-being, not you and not your soon-to-be ex, a co-parent counselor, a family therapist. And your question is actually a great question to talk to them. So an example would be you get your spouse and say, look, we're going to separate, but we need to make sure that we put our children's needs first. So let's go and find a co-parent counselor. And a lot of courts and cities have these support people available complimentary to somebody on a budget. And let's sit down with this person and have them help us to ensure that whatever we end up with in terms of our final MSA, that we are doing the highest and best for our children. So even if you're not getting along with your spouse at this time, which is typically often the case, very few spouses would not receive that request in a positive way, Rosalind. So it's so helpful. And with the divorcees that I interviewed, there was a real measurable difference that those that involve professionals to help them with this process of how to put the children first, then they did a lot better. Because you brought another voice into the room, that's a voice that's a trained professional who is only interested in your children. They don't care about your side. They don't care about your spouse's side.
I love that, Andy, and it's especially important because every parent pays lip service to, yes, the best interests of our kids, and then they go off on their agenda, and it's very hard to be dispassionate and non-judgmental when it comes to divorcing a person who you may really not like and respect anymore. And when you're dealing with a professional who's child-focused and has experience in this regard, they're going to keep you both in line and on target and focused on what really is in the best interest of children and not what we pay lip service to with. Do you agree?
I could not agree more, because it is correct. All parents pretty much have that lip service. I'm putting my kids first. But divorce is a process, and your emotions are going to have high and lows, and it's just really, really challenging on parents because your dreams you once had are coming to an end. Okay, so you may be saying I'm going to put my children first, and you may even start off doing that. But the problem is most families are going to get off the rails. So you need a third party helping you and your spouse to decouple in a manner that truly puts your children first. And the best way to do this is with a co-parent counselor who you meet with maybe once a month, once every 6 weeks, sometimes even twice a month. As you're going through the process and finalizing your MSA, and even post-MSA for the first 1 or 2 years, ideally, until the emotions kind of calm down and both you and your spouse are comfortably moving on in your own separate lives and reach a point where you're able to co-parent effectively, without really negative ramifications on your children.
Yes, and that special person can come from a variety of options, an actual therapist, a parenting coordinator, a divorce coach. It depends on the exact situation and the challenges that you're facing, I would imagine. Is that right?
Yes. And one of the couples I remember interviewing, they found a play therapist. Their children were younger, so play therapy, I talk about this in the book, is a subset of children's therapy, where, because you can't really sit a 6 or 7-year-old on a couch and talk to them for an hour, but through play, you're able to determine how healthy the child is and any challenges in his or her life. So they put their younger children, the play therapist, who was solely interested in the children's well-being, and they found a licensed therapist who was basically a co-parenting counselor who they met with about every 2 weeks. No, I think it was about every 2 to 3 weeks during the negotiation phase. And this co-parenting counselor had an additional role. She helped the parents draft the parenting plan that went into the MSA. So it had the interest of both parents, but paramount was what the well-being of the children. And as the divorce played out, and as this couple landed, Rosalind, they reduced the frequency of the meetings with the co-parent counselor because they didn't need her as much, because they arrived at a place where they were able to consistently parent their children in a much healthier manner from 2 separate households. And that's really the picture you want to have if you can manage that. And again, in so many states, and we talk about this in the book, so many states and provinces, there are complementary or slide-in fee scale services available to help parents who are going through their divorce. So the situation I described just now, you had a therapist for the children who gave feedback to the parents as to how they were doing and challenges the kids were having. And then the parents had a co-parenting coordinator to help them draft a parenting plan that put the needs of the children first, but also, of course, considered some of the requests that each of the parents had. And they met with this co-parenting counselor post-divorce when they arrived at different situations that they couldn't agree on, and the co-parenting counselor helped them to reach agreement in a manner that put the needs of the children first and allowed the parents to create a dynamic where they would eventually get along on a level that they could parent on their own without her services. So it's kind of like it's a professional where part of the professional goal is to help the parents reach a point where they don't need her any longer.
Absolutely. Well, that's excellent advice, and I'm so glad you shared that with us, Andy. We've been talking to Andy Heller, and we're going to be right back. This is Rosalind Sedacca with Divorce, Dating, and Empowered Living on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network.
Hi, this is Cece Schatz, the doyenne of relationship building, divorce, dating, and life coach of Going Solo Network. Divorcing is hard, and with children involved, it can be awful for the parents, especially for the children. I have something that will help. SplitSmart.com. SplitSmart is designed to empower parents by giving them the tools and guardrails they need to stay on course for a more peaceful and loving co-parenting future. If your goal is to have your children thrive in healthy, loving relationships with both parents, if you want a peaceful, mutually respectful, and supportive co-parenting plan and schedule tailored specifically for your family, if you want to quickly reach a child-centered custody resolution with a mutually agreed support agreement, plus save money, then SplitSmart is for you. Need help along the way? No worries. Going Solo Network has coaches, mentors, and professionals that can efficiently help you. So start today. Begin to put your mind at ease. Get organized, feel empowered as you move forward in your life, meeting the needs of your family. Your children will thank you. Visit SplitSmart.com today to get started on your family's brighter and more joyous tomorrow.
Hello, I'm Cece Schatz, and I'd like to welcome you to Going Solo Network, #1 complete singles connection. We strive to connect singles in a positive and fun way. Together, singles will begin to make new and lasting friendships, learn more about themselves, and embrace our new today lifestyle of going solo. Being single doesn't mean you have to be alone, and you can live a full, fun life, bringing your vibration to a higher level of attraction. Going Solo Network is an interactive social support singles community with several platforms helping singles connect with other like-minded individuals. We cover things like relationship loss, divorce recovery, embracing being single, single parenting, restructuring relationships, relationship building, transition into dating, and dating itself, solo in business, and going solo travelers. Be sure to join our private and exclusive fun interactive websites designed for singles today who want to begin to embrace living and enjoying the space they're in. Together we will learn to open our hearts, our minds. We will begin to share and connect with others while exploring our personal life goals as we begin to make a place in our new life. We will start to move forward in going solo to actually living our best lives. Going solo doesn't mean you have to be alone. Today, together, let's begin changing your life. Today, join the singles at Going Solo Network and start to live your new life. I'll see you there on GoingSoloNetwork.com.
Okay, we're back. This is Rosalind Sedacca. You're listening to Divorce, Dating, and Empowered Living on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. And today we're talking to Andy Heller, who is the author of Take the High Road. And he's talking to us about really wise ways of divorcing, using a more of a business focus to the process to keep down the emotional pain and turmoil that people experience. Can you talk a little bit more about that, your approach to navigating divorce and communicating using business skills?
Sure. So, Rosalind, just to let everybody know a little bit about me, I'm a businessman. I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm not a divorce attorney. I don't have the same background that you had. So I went through a divorce on my own, and I noticed kind of a gap in a divorce book space, and I hope that my book is filling that gap. But in compiling this book, I interviewed countless therapists, attorneys, co-parenting counselors, and divorcees themselves, both those that had challenging divorces and those that arrived at a point where they were able to really co-parent effectively. So what I brought into the book are business skills that you can use in working with your soon-to-be ex, where really the communication is challenging. So I'll give you one nugget right now. So many of these couples describe being in a place for a year, 2 years, sometimes longer, where whatever suggestion they had for their ex to their ex was rejected. Well, I remember one of the couples said, she said, I could have told him that the world is round and he would have argued with me that the world was flat. Mm-hmm. So this is unfortunately a dynamic, but the problem is you've got to raise these children. You've got to come up with some solutions and logistical decisions during this time period that you can't communicate. So a business skill is, taking that example about the world being flat, when you approach somebody and you own a suggestion, in most cases, if you don't get along, that person's going to say no to anything that comes out of your mouth. So here's a tip, and we talk about this in the book. Instead of telling your ex what you think he or she should do to solve a problem, define the problem and ask your ex what they would do. Let me give you an example. So you want your child wants to play basketball with his buddies. Your ex-wife wants him to do ballet, which would be good for him. And maybe there's a challenge in schedule, and it might be challenging to get both. So instead of saying to your ex, I think little Johnny should do basketball, you define the problem and ask her what she would suggest. So, hey, Susan, we got a real problem. I imagine you have this in your household too. Johnny is complaining about ballet. I'm getting a lot of challenges. He doesn't really want to go, and it's really difficult to get him to go. Do you have any thoughts? Do you have any suggestions? Okay, so you empower your ex to come to you with a suggestion that he or she will own. So you find very often they will come back with a suggestion that is very similar to what you would say, but you allow him or her to own it. All you're doing is asking, what do you think we should do? And if they come to you with a suggestion that's maybe a step forward, but it's not quite what you want, we give you some skills to massage it. Okay, well, that's a great answer. I love this part, but here's another concern I have. And again, you create a question. You don't tell them what you want or where your head is at. And the goal there, Rosalind, is to arrive at an agreement that your former spouse owns the suggestion, yet it's fairly close to what you wanted anyhow, but you were not pushing this person to what your preference was. You were empowering her or him to provide you what their thoughts were. And this is a business skill that you can use in high conflict situations, and I got about dozens more of these that are really helpful in to be able to, again, you've got to communicate with a person for a period of time that in some cases it's almost impossible to communicate with. So employing very specific business strategies used in high conflict situations within your divorce can be a great way to manage your children's lives, reduce the conflict points until you guys arrive at a point where you can actually talk again, and it's a little bit easier.
I think that's a great idea, Andy. I love that because it's very important when you're speaking to an ex or a co-parent that they're not interested in what you think and what you want and what you believe. Their goal isn't to make you happy any longer. When you're focused on the children and taking your interests out of it, you're much more likely to get to some resolution or to some point that you could mutually agree on, and that's a great approach to get that started. So thank you for sharing that. And before we go any further, I wanted to give you an opportunity to tell our listeners how to find you and your book.
Sure. So our book, we just debuted a couple days ago. You can get the book online on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target.com. Just do a Google search for Take the High Road, Andy Heller, and you'll get a link, and you can have the book in your hands, I think, in a couple of days.
Wonderful. Well, that's really great. In the time we have left, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned in one of your chapters, prepare for light switch living. Can you tell me what that means?
Oh, yeah. This may be one of my favorite chapters to write, and to be frank, most of the input came from interview and others. This chapter came from me, and it was just something that I realized was a real challenge. So, Rosalind, let's say you get divorced and you got 2 kids, okay? So when you guys lived together, you had this house or large apartment that was comfortable enough with 3 bedrooms. You had a bedroom for you and your spouse, and then you had a bedroom each for your children, okay? And there's a hub of activity and things are going on. Well, when you get divorced and you have shared custody, the dynamic is that you need to have a residence that's large enough so you and your children can be comfortable when they're with you. But the residence is actually too big for a person by themselves, and it's kind of lonely. I would walk by my children's rooms when they weren't with me, and I had this big home all to myself. It's pretty darn depressing. And then you had different types of work days. So my work day when my children were with me, I had to contract it. So I could be home in time to cook dinner, to be available to my children, to be a super dad. And then all my social activities, I had to put those on my non-custodial days. If I had those days where I had to work 12 hours, those were the days I did it. So what light switch living is basically it's on or off. There's no dimmer. The times with your children, they're full of fun. There's laughter in the house. There's noise. There's somebody to talk to over the meals. And you're busy. Your kids are there. You tuck them in. When they're not with you, it's quiet in the house. It's kind of depressing unless you're having friends over or you've already found a significant other. You miss your kids. So this chapter touches on just making sure you're aware that this is a pretty emotional occurrence. And there's no real solution to it, Rosalind, other than awareness, to recognize that your life can have complete different textures based on whether your children are with you or not. Maybe you need to check in with a therapist yourself so you don't get depressed when the kids are not with you. There's also the business component. You need to manage your professional obligations so that you do have more time when your kids are with you, because kids take time. They take your attention. You got to be able to have the time to cook meals, to do homework, to pick the kids up from their activities. And you need to make sure you have the time to do that, so you can't work the same type of a work day as when the kids are not with you. And do you want to be that parent that when the kids are with you, you're hiring babysitters all the time so you can go out on dates? No, do your dating on other days. Particularly if your kids are younger, you want to be with them. That's what custodial time is for. So light switch living is about recognizing that you really have two different lifestyles, two different types of days based on whether you have custodial time or not, each with his own challenges. And the solution is kind of recognizing that, planning your schedule accordingly, and making sure that you got enough stuff going on when your kids are not with you, so it's not so lonely in the house.
Yes. That's a very important point you bring up, and not everyone recognizes that in advance. So thank you for talking about that. I totally agree. I speak to my own clients about using that time as a gift when you can refer to it in that way, because you're so used to when you were both parenting together, you had your schedules and your routines, and now suddenly there's days when you just don't have those children, and when you're not doing the work, they can be sad, lonely, you can be depressed, and that's when you have to look for the gift in your life, the opportunity to live life renewed. What do I want to do with this bonus time, with these hours that aren't filled with parenting the way they were, and really start addressing the new, the exciting, the wonderful, the gifts you could give yourself following new pursuits and hobbies and interests and getting out and doing things for yourself, because it's all about mindset. If your mindset isn't adjusted in that way, then suddenly you're looking at it as a gap and a loss, and instead you can turn it into a bonus in your life, new special time to pursue what really is in your best interest, and it becomes a blessing. So everything is about mindset, don't you think?
I could not agree more. And, this tip kind of touches on what I'm trying to do in this book. Divorce is an experiential journey, and we all learn lessons and tips, and nobody does it perfect. We're all human beings, which means we have the flaws that humans have. But the problem is that you could really use these tips if you had them on day one, instead of learning them sometimes by making mistakes that impact you, your children, and even your ex during a divorce. So the concept of my book is to take these observations like keeping focused and light switch living, and giving this to the divorcee before they start their journey, with a goal that the journey is easier, you can do it healthier, and it's so much easier for you to put the needs of your children first beyond just lip service. And that's kind of the concept of why I did this. And, my thought, Rosalind, if the person is having a great divorce, but 2 or 3 of my tips can make it easier for them, well, there's a bonus right there.
Totally agree. And just to remind our listeners, the name of the book is Take the High Road, Divorce with Compassion for Yourself and for Your Family. And it's available on Amazon, and the author is Andy Heller, who we've been talking to today. And Andy, You've had a lot of wonderful ideas and insights for us that I really appreciate. So I hope our listeners will take advantage of your wisdom in your book and wish you lots of success with the new book.
Rosalind, it's a pleasure. And I also, during this journey, getting to meet people like you and to see that the service you offer to people, because I know that this divorce is really tough. And it's best to admit that. And when you have resources available to make it easier and to where you can go through this process and land where you're in a better place, your children are in a better place, my advice to all of you guys is to you listen to these podcasts and pick up some good books and take those courses and get these kids in therapy where you can, and your children will land in a better place at the end of this.
Yeah, I agree. And I thank you so much for your time. And I want to thank our listeners as well. As you know, the Child-Centered Divorce Network is available for all of you with many free e-books and e-programs, and as well as courses and programs and personal coaching services. So take a look there, as well as the blog. I have hundreds of articles, and you could find it all at childcentereddivorce.com. And I want to thank you for listening again to WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network, Divorce, Dating, and Empowered Living, and I hope you'll join us again next week. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.